I think we're ready to start now. So, welcome, I guess, to the Advancing Your Kaiju Filmmaking Skills panel. We've got a presentation that I'm going to go through real quick, then we'll do Q&A afterwards, so if you have any questions, I guess try to hold off until the end there. So this is just going to be a panel for, if you're starting out in kaiju filmmaking or if you already have some basic knowledge and you want to try and advance that. We did this panel last year. It was a pretty big success, I think. And so this year we're going to go a lot more in-depth compared to that. So who am I? My name is Jake D'Annunzio, and on YouTube I run the YouTube channel Kaiju Legends. And this channel is devoted to just sort of kaiju fan films in general. And as a lifelong kaiju fan, with a passion for filmmaking, I've been really making films for as long as I can remember. Back when I was 5 years old, just sort of mashing figures in front of the camera, and now I've just sort of advanced a lot. And so, yeah, I believe that fans creating their own kaiju fan films is one of the biggest parts of the kaiju community. It just doesn't allow fans to create their own stories and see monster battles that you probably would never see on the big screen. I got a short video to show my work. Sort of a short sample. Mainly on YouTube, I run a show called Zero Fire. That's just sort of my outlet for doing filmmaking. Anyway, so getting started. So how will you make your movies? And there's a couple different ways you can go about it. First, you're going to use figures or models. Things like using Bandai vinyls, or SH Monstars, small tracks, all that sort of stuff. All that. And this obviously will involve stop motion and puppetry figures, which we'll go into a little more of this later. And method 2 is computer generated or CG animation. And this involves using 3D models and animation software to create more seamless looking animations. If you're using Bandai vinyls or figures and stuff like that, it's physical props, but 3D animation will look a lot more realistic if you're going for that. And for that, programs like Gary's Mod, Source Filmmaker, and MMD are often used. And we'll go into more detail on those once again later. Method 3 is live action, involving human actors and suit actors like the actual films to create your fan films. Especially if you're doing suit stuff, this could be one of the more cost-effective and time-consuming methods, but in the long run, it can be worth it. And the one example that I pointed out here is Godzilla Battle Royale by Billy DeBose. It's on YouTube, you can watch it, and he uses kaiju suits galore in that film, and it's a really great spectacle if you want to try and see what that looks would entail. So equipment, obviously, what will you need if you're going to make a fan film? Camera, of course, if you're going to do live action stuff. And there's a huge variety in brands, quality, prices, etc. So do your research and look at as many different outlets as you can. I mean, I'm not an expert on cameras, I'll say, but just look it up, and there's basic stuff like higher quality footage will look better and higher zooms. And there's places like Best Buy or Sony Panasonic stores that you can go. And investing also in a tripod to hold your camera is a very wise move. Tripods, if you don't know, are 3-legged stands, and you screw the camera on top and hold it steady. And that allows you to pan the camera around, move it up and down, and all that stuff. Sets and props, if you're doing that. So you can do physical miniature sets, you can use green screens and blue screens, and other assortments of props. And if you're using human actors, having costumes and props specifically for them can help sort of give them more character. You know, if you have military people, you probably want to have them wearing military outfits and using military guns and stuff as props. Obviously not field guns out in your stats. Software. If you're doing a full CGI film, animation and rendering software is going to be necessary for that. On that note as well, if you're doing 3D, you probably want not a super expensive computer, but something more higher end since you're rendering full 3D shots. And other editing software, for putting in special effects, compiling footage, adding sound, music, and all of that. So pre-production. First, just come up with a basic idea for what you want to make and begin to plan it out. So, you can use scripts and storyboards. And, writing a full-fledged script or even, just taking an idea in your head and writing it sort of like a novel almost can really help you sort of plan out the idea. And, a lot of times if you choose not to use a script or anything and you improvise things if you have human actors, that can lead to some plot holes and stuff occurring later on. So you might forget exactly what you're going to try and go from there. Storyboards can help plan out exactly how your shots look. A storyboard is essentially a panel by panel thing where you sort of draw out what you want the final product to look like. And that can be helpful for planning out monster battles. And overall, just be creative and take the time to come up with something really original. Like if you just want to do Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, like obviously there's tons of official movies based on that, and there's tons of fan films. But so sort of take the time and think about, okay, what can I add to this simple idea to make it more original? Gathering your materials, just make sure that before filming you've got everything you need and you finalize your idea. Otherwise, you may have to improvise later parts of the film, and that can be a little challenging. So actual filming, specifically if you're using figures to create the kaiju scenes in your film. There are multiple ways of sort of going about this. So first is stop motion, which involves moving figures little by little to create animation. Puppetry, which is sort of moving them around by yourself, and post-production animation. And so we've got a couple of examples of all these real quick, just to go through them. So this is a short little example of stop motion, and you can see, very little movements at a time. And what this amounts to right here is essentially about 7 or 8 minutes of animation for, in the end, what you'll see about 3, maybe 4 seconds of footage. So stop motion can be very time consuming, but it can be worth it in the end if you want to create real smooth animation. And there's a couple of things to take into consideration when you're doing stop motion, like 3 sort of principles that I like to follow. The first is bounce, and that's sort of, if something's making an impact, it's not going to stop flat where it is. So if you're punching something, your fist won't immediately stop when you hit it. It'll sort of bounce backwards. So that's something to keep in consideration when you're doing that. The second is easing, which when an object's moving, it's not going to move the same speed the entire way. So you can sort of practice this. And it'll move slowly at first, speed up as it's near the middle of the animation. Toward the end, it'll once again slow down to a stop. So you can just practice that and stuff going side to side. And we got another short clip here that shows how stop motion can actually be used for sort of fake camera movements. So as you can see here, moving the figures little by little to simulate camera movement. With the camera not actually moving. This is a very good method to do if you have a green screen. If you have a physical set, it might be harder to do because you'll have to actually try and move the camera. But that's sort of what you can create by doing that. And the third principle I forgot to mention is blurring. So when stuff's moving fast, you're not going to be able to see it crystal clear. There's probably times you can see that later in this, but if something's moving fast, it's going to look blurred. So if you can incorporate that, that's mainly going to be in post-production. That'll make stop motion look a lot more realistic. There's actually programs like Adobe After Effects that have built-in things like called pixel motion blur. And you apply that to your footage, and it'll essentially add motion blur to stop motion only in the areas that it's necessary. And here's another clip of stop motion. This is just sort of creating a more fast-paced scene. And this is a good time, I guess, to bring up Tamashi stage stands. And these are about $20 on Amazon. You get 3 sets of stands like this, which is sort of consistent of a crane arm and a claw on the end that'll attach around the waist of humanoid people. And obviously, if you're going to be filming with humanoid people, you really want to use these, because a lot of times the figure will not be able to support itself. And this can really help you, like keep it supported in that position that you want while you're filming. So by doing that, you really are able to, get movements out of those that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Yeah, but this is just once again an example. You'll see some motion blur here as he's, punching and kicking around, all that kind of stuff. And then post-production animation, or puppetry actually first, is just sort of taking figures and holding them yourself and moving them around in front of the camera to simulate movement. And this can sort of be used to create more smooth-looking movements with stuff that might be harder to do with stop motion. And obviously, one of the key things about this is infamously not getting your fingers in the shot while doing this. Because if you do that, that can cause problems later on. And that's another little example right there. His arms actually popped out of his sockets, and that's being held to sort of simulate him covering his eye and moving it around. So you can sort of get really creative with the way that you use puppetry on Bandai vinyl figures especially. And then post-production animation, which only applies to some programs that can do this really, but this specific example is with Adobe After Effects. It has a tool called the Puppet Pin. And what that essentially, let's set this to repeat so I don't have to keep doing that. What the Puppet Pin tool does is it allows you to pinpoint certain areas on a still image, and it essentially will act like a marionette, and you can drag points around and move them all you want. So with stuff like that, you can get motion you wouldn't be able to otherwise with Bandai vinyls. Like we have super smooth tail movements and kicking, and opening and closing its mouth, which is something you can't do on that figure. And then we have lighting. So investing in some large studio lights will definitely help to make sure lighting stays consistent. This is mainly with stop motion, because you're animating stop motion for long periods at a time, and if you don't have artificial lighting that's going to be the same throughout, you're going to end up with the shot changing colors rapidly. There are studio lights you can get everywhere, on Amazon, for not super expensive, but relatively cheap prices for what you get. I think I actually bought 2 studio lights in a bundle with a green screen, and that was for $100. So I would definitely take the time to invest in that. And lighting can really help make certain effects look more realistic. So if you know the kind of shot that you want to go for when you're filming with a figure, you can try and get your lights to sort of match what that would be. If you're filming in the daytime, you can aim one of your lights directly overhead, like the sun is shining down on it, and that'll help sort of create the shadows that it's making on itself match more with what will be in line with the rest of the scene. So 3D animation. If you choose to use computer animation in your film rather than physical techniques, there's a lot of things you need to take note of. So programs to use. First is Source Filmmaker, which is a free app on Steam. If any of you use that, that's also a completely free thing. But Source Filmmaker is an official thing made by Valve, the company who runs it. And it allows you to essentially import models from wherever you want, and it uses the engine that they use in their games, and you can essentially move props around and all that. Second is Gary's Mod, which is also on Steam and runs on the Source gaming engine. This, however, does cost money, and it's a bit more of a game, I suppose, than an animation tool, but it definitely does allow you to do a lot of animation with it. It has plugins in it that'll help you out later on, like Stop Motion Helper, and a lot of that stuff. We'll get more into that later, I believe. And then finally is MMD, or Miku Miku Dance, which I've never personally used before, but if you look up Asusa Productions on YouTube, he actually uses this program a lot. And it's pretty interesting the way it works. I mean, obviously, I can't attest to it, but I mean, it works. And then there's other 3D rendering programs, like Cinema 4D and After Effects. And these ones will be more on the costly side, but as well as the computer power heavy side. But investing in these, if you really want to dedicate yourself to doing 3D animation, would be definitely a good choice, I believe. And 3D animation is something that's not the easiest to master. I've barely begun to like scratch the surface, I think, with it. So if you want to dedicate yourself to it, just have a lot of patience and take your time with just sort of practicing 3D animation. More 3D animation, there's a lot of this. So my personal tips, just from my experience, is if you're using Gary's Mod, install add-ons from the Steam Workshop. The Steam Workshop is essentially where the community can create any sort of like plugins or models that they want for things like Source Filmmaker and Gary's Mod. And in fact, they actually have a lot of community release models for Kaiju, both from like Ultraman and Godzilla. They're ripped like directly from the games themselves, so you can use some of those in your animation. And they also have plugins like Stop Motion Pupper, Ragdoll Mover, like I was saying, which essentially will allow you to like sort of program the models in a way to move. You can set one keyframe like sort of like this and another like that. And using those plugins, it'll move by itself into those positions. That's kind of cool. There are hundreds upon hundreds of tutorials on YouTube for all of these programs. So just take advantage of that. Like sit down for a while and just sort of watch them and get to know the program that you want to use. And in 3D programs like these, you have a much larger freedom over the environment of your scene. So name and camera angles, and even add in smaller details, you know, like civilians running away or military planes flying overhead. Maybe harder to do if you're doing physical animation with figures, because with that, you're sort of, you know, having to work with only what's in front of you. 3D animation, you can add in essentially whatever you want. And 3D animation doesn't have to be the only way, and this applies to all methods. So sort of combine methods and find a good mesh that'll work for you. And for example, for me, like I use 3D animation mainly for adding in things like jets, tanks, and ships, and other elements. And I've got a short video that just sort of showcases that. It's not too much, but it's this one. So this is just sort of an example of using, I use Gary's Mod for this ship specifically, and yes, it's an A-Wing from Star Wars. But yeah, so just animating that, you can sort of mesh together with moving figures around, and you can get some neat results with that. So now post-production. What exactly does it entail, and it's really where your film's going to come to life. You're going to take your bare footage and go wild with it and add in everything you want. So this will be things like keying out green and blue screen backgrounds, adding in effects like explosion, fire, themes, and anything you can imagine really. You know, adding in music, sound design, color correction, and just overall finalizing the project. So this is really one of the more work-intensive stages. So what programs are best for post-production? I get asked this a lot, like what editing software to use. My number one recommendation for special effects is Adobe After Effects, which is probably one of the more costly programs. I believe the newest version you have to pay roughly $30 a month to use it, but if you're able to do that, I would say it's definitely worth it. I've really only used it for just over a year at this point. I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of what it's capable of. Adobe Premiere is another program. It's less focused on adding in special effects and all that, and more so on compiling footage together and doing sound design and music and all that. It is a little more in depth from what I've used of it. But personally what I use for all that is Sony Vegas Movie Studio, which is a more on the cheap side program. It's a one-time like $40, $60 fee depending on what version you get. But it is able to do like compiling footage, sound design, music, and all of that. And it is what I used before After Effects for all my sort of green screen and special effects stuff. And it's good for what it is, I'll admit that. It has a lot of problems. It crashes a lot, and it's corrupted my file on, I think, one occasion that I didn't think of. But if it's all you can use, I would definitely say to use it. Windows Movie Maker and other free software, if that's all that you can use, then take advantage of it, I guess. I mean, I haven't used Movie Maker since probably 2007 or 8 at this point, and it may have updated since then to be better, but if all you need to do is basic putting footage together and adding in a track of music and a couple of sound effects, then it should work fine. Audacity is more so for in-depth sound design. So you can take a lot of things in Audacity. We'll discuss this later in detail. You can do a lot. You can alter voices, alter sound effects, like add reverberization, echoes, change the pitch. Adobe Photoshop. This is good for image editing and all that if you've ever used it. I used to use it a while back, like for adding in some special effects for stop motion, and all that. But it allows you to do a lot. Personally, I mainly use it now for like graphic design and thumbnails and all that sort of stuff. But really, if you take advantage of it, you can do a lot with it. Paint.net, which is sort of the online, less in-depth version of Photoshop. I've not used it much, but it can do sort of the basic stuff. Like that's all you need, like basic cropping and all that. So special effects. Where do you get special effects? They can be found in tons of places online, both for free and ones that you have to pay for. And VideoCopilot.net is the one site that I will always recommend for any sort of special effects. They have a fantastic range of like both stock effects and plugins for programs like Adobe After Effects and Adobe Premiere. So they have Action Essentials 2, which is a pack of hundreds upon hundreds of action effects, from explosions and fire, sparks, dirt charges, and water blasts. Shockwave is a pack of sort of shockwave elements, and those can be used to make a lot of sort of sci-fi looking stuff. And it's a really nice plugin to use. VC Flight Kit, which if you're doing military stuff like with jets, that can be a good program. It includes a lot of aerial explosions, includes a huge sound effect for jets and planes flying overhead and all that stuff. And I believe it also includes 3D models for their plugin Element 3D, which is, I will say it's expensive, and I haven't gotten the chance to use it myself, but from looking at it and what I've seen it be able to do, it's a very, very good plugin. Video Copilot has released tons of free and paid model packs for this. What Element 3D essentially allows you to do is it allows you to import 3D models and put them directly into a live action scene using a 3D camera tracker. So you can take a simple shot of you pointing the camera, like looking up at the sky, and you can seamlessly put in airplanes and jets flying overhead. Optical flares. I'm going to sound very J.J. Abramsy here and say I love lens flares, especially if you're doing, stuff with After Effects and just using figures and 3D models where you're essentially adding on fake elements onto fake elements. It can sort of help actually create a lot of lighting situations I've found. There's a way you can make lens flares have a sort of heat glow around them, and that actually helps a lot for explosions I've found. Saber is an entirely free plugin which allows you to create energy beams. Its main selling point is sort of the fact that you can create easy lightsaber effects, but I found it's a lot better to create sort of energy effects in general. You can create like atomic ray with that, all sorts of stuff. And this site also has over 150 tutorials using both their effects and the basic stuff that's provided to you in After Effects. So if you have the time, just sort of sit down and watch some of their tutorials. You'll have to sit through some lame jokes once in a while, but they're really informative. And a lot of the stuff they teach doesn't have to apply to just After Effects alone. It can apply to other editing software and just filmmaking in general. And it's a really good source of learning. They've been my saving grace a lot of times for learning special effects. More special effects. So, tips. YouTube, once again, is home to hundreds upon hundreds of helpful tutorials for video editing software. Check them out. You can learn the basics with them, as well as, my recommendation is just experiment in the program yourself. You know, you don't have to follow tutorials exactly. If you see them use a technique that you like, you can try and alter that and create something entirely new with that. And perhaps the hardest part of making a kaiju film is making the effects look convincing. And a couple of tips that I've learned to sort of help make them look a little more realistic. You know, if you're using figures to make your fan film, obviously, you know, your audience can be like, oh, well, that's a figure, but adding in a lot of spectacle around it can help sort of accentuate how good it can look. So depth. So you can give your scene and its subject's depth by adding in some artificial blur. Once again, this applies to others like, you know, motion blur and stuff, but also making your objects look out of focus if they're far away in the shot, and if something's really close in the shot that you don't want to be the focus of that scene, you can add in blurring on that. Lighting, giving elements like fire and explosions, glows, and lens flares, like I was saying earlier, can really help them make them seem more lifelike and give off sort of a heat. After Effects has a built-in glow plugin as well as some stock lens flares that we can use. Impact. So artificial camera shake can quickly help make some effects seem to affect the world around them, like punching and kicking and explosions and all that. So we've got another quick video to show here that sort of showcases all this kind of stuff. So yeah, here's an example of lighting. You know, we have a bright light here and everything around it, and in front of it's going to appear darker. Once again, this is using lens flares and optical flares. There's some action effects there, more lighting there, and here's some impact stuff. Like every time something's being hit, the camera's being shook, and that really helps to sort of accentuate that. You know, even though these are Bandai vinyl figures and all that, it helps to give the illusion that they're actually interacting with the world around them. So more special effects stuff. So more tips. So the process. This is what, at least what I do when I'm doing special effects. The way that I go through things is first I key out backgrounds if I need to. Usually I'm more of a green and blue screen type of person. If you're using physical miniature sets, this is really something you need to worry about. Environment building, that's the process afterwards where, you know, the background is put in, buildings around it, any sort of stuff. Lighting and atmospheric effects, once again, you can change the brightness and contrast of certain elements, and it'll help to make them look sort of more blended in with the background. And any other effects that you want to add in afterwards. And so we've got another short thing. So this is the basic process of what one of my shots would go through. So there's a normal green screen shot. The background is keyed out using a chroma keyer. And then, you know, like the sky and buildings are added in. And then add in brightness and contrast to make it look a lot darker outside. And then finally you just add in like motion blur and rain. You can get a really cool shot that looks like that. So that's just a basic shot. It doesn't take too much time for me, but here's a couple of other before and after comparisons of what a shot looks like. So there's just a simple shot of Gabor coming up, and in editing, a lot of dust elements are combined to give off the effect that he's coming out of the ground. And that's just how you can turn a basic still image into an action-packed scene. Here's another example of fast-paced stop motion. So this is like, I believe, almost 4 or 5 frames in total that I ended up doing here to create this short shot of him ducking for explosions. Alright, so learning what does and doesn't work is a big part of creating interesting and realistic effects. You know, so just try compositing together different effects for different results. If you try to put like 2 different explosion effects together, you can often create something that looks a little more powerful and bigger than originally. So After Effects, the program comes, like I said earlier, with a lot of built-in features that'll help you with your effects, like lighting creators and basic lens flares. And it also, the program also comes with a built-in particle system, which allows you to create from scratch different sort of particle effects. And this can be used for fires, beams, etc. if you don't have stock effects that are covenant. So a learning curve, obviously. As with anything you're going to try to learn, practice will always make perfect. And over time, you'll become more efficient in general at creating effects shots, and you'll learn new techniques to make your shots look even better. And so watch tutorials and check out what other kaiju filmmakers do. Oh, that is not what to do. So yeah, check out what other filmmakers have been doing using the same software, and just overall keep experimenting, like I say. And I've got a short clip here once again that showcases the difference between. This is a shot that I created in 2012, one of the first real stop motions I tried to make. And it's very basic, but this is eventually what I came to learn to do. That's an animated GIF doing an explosion right there, and eventually, after getting some stock effects, do more stuff like that. And the difference between those shots there was actually only a same with these next two, but just goes to show how, even over such a small course of time, you'll really be able to hone your skills and learn sort of what does and doesn't work once again. So music. Any film needs music, obviously, and choosing the best song for a sequence is extremely important. And it can help set the tone, the pace, and overall atmosphere of the scene. So for example, if you have a fast-paced fight scene, try and pick a song that is also fast-paced, for that scene. And a lot of times, actually, what I'll do is I'll just sort of, like sit by my computer, put on my headphones, and listen to a song that I want a fight to go to, and I'll sort of listen to it and be like, yeah, just sort of playing out this scene in my head. And that really helps to sort of have the scene fit with the song, almost. And that will really help make it seem more seamless, And there's also tons of options out there to choose from. Soundtracks from various Godzilla, Ultraman, and Gamera films are easy to come by, and they can more often than not be found on YouTube and in various places online also. So take a listen and find the tracks you want to use. Soundtracks can be purchased from various outlets, Amazon. And, there's even Japan stores for soundtracks that you can't find otherwise for kaiju films. And if you're a talented composer of own music, I lack this talent, but I will say if you are able to do so, compose your own music. Because not only will it help make your film stand out instead of, it's just another film using the Fukube Godzilla theme once again. But it'll also help you to avoid copyright. So, So be wary, of course, YouTube's copyright policies. They're quite broken, and use a song with strict copyright regulation, and your video and/or channel can be taken down very quickly. So, and from my experience, what I've found is that soundtracks from Japanese kaiju films usually tend to be safe. The only sort of copyright issue that I've had on my channel is what's called a monetization claim. And usually this happens with YouTube's automated copyright system. When a video is uploaded and it takes time to process, what's happening there is YouTube's going through the video for any songs that it knows don't belong to you. And it'll say your video has a copyright claim, and it'll say monetized by claimant. What that actually means is that anything you're gaining from the video using that copyrighted music will be going toward who claimed it instead of you. And I will say, if you're going to be making kaiju films and not using your own score, I would definitely say to not monetize your videos. It might be nice to make money off of them, but from what I've seen, as soon as you do a partnership and start monetizing your videos to make money off them, you instantly become a much more vulnerable target to copyright strikes and takedowns. So, sound effects. Sound effects are sort of the final step to making your scene seem like it. And they can help punctuate certain action. Punching, explosions, kicks, beams, gunshots, and all that. So, try compiling sound effects together to make unique sounding noises. So putting together different explosion sounds, punching sounds, monster roars, and all that can really help give your scene more depth. If you're using, you know the explosion sound that you see defined in all the old 60s kaiju films and stuff. So if you take that and add in some other stock explosion effects on top of that, it can create something that sounds a little more unique, and also will sound more powerful with the more sound effects that you compile together. Once again, Audacity, like I mentioned earlier, is a completely free program that can do both basic and slightly more in-depth sound editing, from changing pitches to making your voice sound like a robot. Audacity is just great for basic sound design. There is a wide range of tutorials for Audacity, but a lot of Audacity, like especially for voice changing, just sort of comes, from experimentation. There's tons of stuff you can do with it. And where do you get sound effects? Once again, we do Copilot.net, where you can purchase Motion Pulse, which is a pack of over 3,000 sound effects that are all royalty free, which means they have no sort of copyright thing on top of them that you need to give credit for or anything. So they're just 3,000 stock effects with everything from like debris crashes to water splashes and pulsing organism effects. It's completely insane how many things there are. And to my knowledge, Toho has released a CD that's full of their famous sound effects and monster movies. So if you don't have any other method of getting them, that's a good way. And, that cut off a little bit, but you can also rip sound effects directly from the movies if there's no other way to obtain them otherwise. For example, the Mutos from Godzilla 2014. There's no real easy way online that you can just download a pack of Muto roars. And so what I did when I was using a Muto was watch the movie and listen for the scenes where there's no music going on, no real background noise, and so sort of record the Muto roar there. You can alter it from there and all that stuff. That's great for monsters that you can't find the roar to, especially Ultra monsters. From Ultraman, there's hundreds upon hundreds of different kaiju, and if you have access to the specific episode that monster's from, I can almost guarantee you there's a scene that you're going to be able to hear the roar of that monster. And finally, so getting your work out there. Obviously, if you're making your own fan films, you want people to see them. And like, of course, you can show them to your family and friends, but YouTube is easily the best way to let others see your finished projects and to get really quick feedback. And you may get criticism, but try and learn from it and just keep making what you want to make. On YouTube, obviously, like some people can be mean online. I know it's a scary thought, but it may seem like they're being really negative about your films. But like instead of just getting mad at me back saying, "Oh no, my film is perfect," so try and learn what they're saying. So take that criticism and apply it to your later works, and you'll eventually just learn to improve. The amateur film contest is G-Fest. Hosted every year, and this allows amateur filmmakers to show off their creations right here at G-Fest. The film contest has a 6-minute time limit, I believe, and that's really the only restriction. So you can really submit any sort of kaiju-related thing you want there. There's also the film festival at G-Fest, which is right across the hall. I actually hosted something there this morning. But if you do advance to the film festival, that's an even better way, because you can have longer slots and do Q&A afterwards for your film, and it can help you get a lot of really quick feedback. The amateur film contest, once again, come and see what your fellow kaiju filmmakers are having to show off. And that's tonight at 9, I believe, right after the costume parade and all that, in one of the bars up there. There's that. Anyway, so now we're doing Q&A, so if you have any questions relating to filmmaking in general, I'm completely open.
So you said there's no way of getting real audio, like, the Muto Wars. I don't know how YouTube does it.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I actually did use a program called YouTube Download when I was first getting stock action effects. It's not the best because most of the stock effects on YouTube are like explosions on green screens, which it's sort of tedious to have to apply a chroma key to every action effect that you would download that way. Yeah, but YouTube MP3 is a good way. Audacity also has a feature where you can record whatever you're playing at, so that's what I use for ripping stuff.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the camera you use specifically for the models and toys. Because most of my experience with trying to record toys has been very, very blurry and hard to focus on pictures out.
Yeah, that is one thing to consider with cameras. Some of them will have autofocus and some of them will switch to flip manually. I use a Sony ADC HD Handycam. I don't remember the exact name of the model, but if you look on Best Buy, a lot of the times in the descriptions, they'll put, as autofocus and for digital zooms and stuff like that. Yeah, but if you just do research, you'll eventually find a camera that should work for you.
Okay, so I noticed that a lot of times when people are kind of showing how to make videos, and this kind of goes along with real life news as well. There's always that green background that's just why is it that color in particular?
So there's 3 colors that are mainly used for cleaning out backgrounds. And in order for most use to least use is sort of a lime green, a blue, and then magenta. And I believe the reason is mainly just because green, primarily because that's the color that you don't see too often when you're doing stuff with live action people. And it's a color with high contrast that, if you put yourself against a green background, unless you're wearing green clothing, you're going to be able to clearly see the outline. And what video editing programs will do is just sort of remove any traces of whatever color you pick from the background. But yeah, that's as much as I know about why it's green. Yeah, and if an object's green, they're going to use a blue screen. If there's green and blue, they'll probably use magenta. So.
If you wanted to make, say, a suit animation, what's the best materials and where would you get to make that suit?
That is an excellent question, one that I cannot answer to my fullest. But from what I know, fiberglass is commonly used for suits. Obviously rubber is what they use in the actual Toho and Ultraman shows and all that. Billy DuBose is at the convention, I believe, and if you see him, I would definitely stop him. He probably knows a lot more about that than I do in terms of suit making. So, yeah, I wish I could answer that better, but that's as far as I know.
When it comes to using, since I don't really have any heavy equipment and stuff, do you know if there's any apps that you'd recommend for special effects?
I believe there are apps on mobile devices that can sort of add in effects. Unfortunately, they all sort of look the same no matter what the shot is that I found.
Yeah.
But yeah, the unfortunate thing is if you want to go all the way with making effects and stuff like that, you do have to be willing to invest a bit of money into effects and stuff like that. Yeah, but I would say do research, just Google up what are good ways to do special effects for free and stuff like that. You'll eventually, you'll find something. Even on PhotoBucket is what I did beforehand. I would look up animated explosion GIF and try and find something that fit that criteria. And it didn't look the best, but it was all I could use and it worked fine. So.
Was it?
I've noticed watching YouTube filmmakers that sometimes when they're using the chroma key, objects or people will still have a green or blue halo around them. What causes that and how do you avoid it?
So that would mainly be caused, so the way you use chroma key usually is you'll use an eyedrop tool and select the color of the background. And usually if you just do that, you'll end up with like you said, a halo around them, a weird outline, and even if your background's not even, you'll end up with splotches of dark grays and blues and stuff. But I believe the remedy for that mainly is just sort of playing with the slider adjustments for chroma key. You can change how much the background is lit. So any color closer to that you picked for the background will be keyed out more and more the more you adjust that. And you can also adjust the alpha channel. And if you slide that more, whatever is not being keyed out will, sort of appear less transparent. I suppose would be the word. Yeah, unfortunately, chroma keying can take a bit of practice to get used to, and it does sort of depend on how well your green screen is.
Lighting has a lot to do with that too, right?
Yes, definitely. That's why I say if you're going to use a green screen for human scenes especially, since you're working on a much larger plane, having studio lights would definitely help a lot.
What's the effect you're talking about in the if you're just standing there and you can do two shots and all of them make them out?
Yeah. Okay, so it's in Adobe After Effects, it's called the color pick tool. And yeah, like I said, it just allows you to pinpoint certain points on it's usually just a still image where we're exploring. And you just move it around that comparing mix. Like this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're doing a great job. What a fantastic overview. I don't want to step on your toes. I am a filmmaker. I've worked with Disney, done special effects and so forth. Just a couple of tips, if you don't mind. The gentleman was asking about cameras. One thing to consider is still cameras, if you're going to do stop motion animation, is just fine. And my recommendation, if you want to do these types of films, is to get a DSLR, which is a still camera that does video capability. One tip for everybody, video cameras have this capability, but learn what progressive and interlaced means in terms of the footage. And always, I don't care what anybody tells you, shoot 24p, 24 frames a second progressive. It'll look more like a movie.
Yeah.
But a DSLR camera would be one of the best ways to go because it automatically has a film look.
Unless you want to do slow motion to make it feel like it's, give it more weight.
More weight, but that's a frame rate. That's how quickly it's acquiring.
But you said 24 frames per second,
Right.
always, but you would
Like
shoot
that.
at 30 or 60 if you want it to be slower. That's the
Right.
reason to do it, and you have to change the shutter speed.
Exactly. So that's getting a little complicated, but like he said,
But it's
it's all in YouTube. Yeah, you can find tutorials on all of this. If your camera has variable frame rates, yes, you can shoot slow-mo. Up to 120 frames per second.
Depending on the camera.
Right, exactly, or 300, if you really want to put some money into it.
Yeah, that is a good point about still image cameras. Just for this demonstration, I filmed my stop motion to just sort of show the process of moving the figure around. But not only that, the main reason that I just do filming for stop motion, that's what I always do, mainly because my camera, the still image function, tends to move the camera around a bit. And that's one of the issues that you have. If you get a really sturdy tripod, that can help sort of prevent that. Yeah, plus still image, if you have a video camera, still image quality might not be the best compared to video. But yeah, if you do get a camera that's DSLR, specifically made for still images, that's definitely, I would say, a good investment if you plan on only doing stop motion.
With the DSLR option, a remote shutter button, they're like $6 on Amazon, and it's so worth it.
That's a good one. Yeah. I've actually never tried a shutter button. So.
I'm not really sure if this is another question or not, but I've been trying to talk to some engineers about
That's a good question, and I assume, for more of the official Toho films, I assume it's resin and stuff like that. Capabilities that look. If you're using figures or miniatures, there's plenty of things online, like miniature building sets to buy, stuff like that. I don't know if you're talking about suits or figures. Yeah, I would do that.
Is this your armor? Okay, cool.
How exactly do you find the backgrounds to in places like green screen?
Well, that's a great question. So, a lot of the backgrounds that I use, especially like skies, are just sort of stock images. If you just look up images on Google, sometimes they kind of populate things. But there's a switch that you can set that shows show Creative Commons content, which is essentially all royalty free. For buildings, I essentially just look up, a skyscraper or a building or something, and a lot of the times the image will have like a street on it or a sky background. So I'll just take it into Photoshop and selectively animate the building. And when I'm doing editing, I'll sort of compile all that together. And some of the effects packs that I was mentioning earlier, like VC Flight Kit, actually comes with a pack of sky maps, which are essentially mirrored images of the sky meant for 3D stuff. But I also use this for 2D stuff.
Thank you for this panel.
Thank you. I don't know actually how we're doing on time, but...
Which is your favorite one that you've ever made?
Oh, favorite film I've made. I'd probably have to say, usually it's end up being whatever I make most recently. Between every sort of episode of my series that I do on YouTube, I learn more and more sort of effects, techniques, and all that kind of stuff. And being able to see all that sort of come into fruition in each episode as I learn more, it just sort of makes me love the next episode.
So you've been doing this since you're 5, so years is that?
12, I'm 17 now, so yeah, devoted all that time of my life to doing this. I'm not going to stop now. Alright, yeah, so I guess we're almost out of time here because we probably got a good time for the next panel to set up. But, so thanks for coming, I guess. If you have any other questions.